No more leaks and rumors. We're breaking down the Washington Commanders 2024 NFL schedule on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this episode of Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can continue this conversation with me by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders today. Sign up to be an insider. You will get news, analysis, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. No hashtags, no apps, no filters, just direct communication with me one-on-one. Again, a way to go beyond the show here. Join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to get started on that today. I'm David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Commander Game Day, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation. And I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, along with our everydayers and everydayers. You already know, but I appreciate you for your continued support for the show. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode, we are diving deep into the Washington Commanders 2024 NFL schedule. I'm going to tell you what I like, what I don't like, the toughest and easiest, or maybe least toughest part of the schedule. First and last four, but first, let's talk about the entire schedule. If you haven't already seen it, it's all over the interweb. It's on the Washington Commanders website. We broke it down on commandercountry.com or commandergameday.com. So you can go find it a whole lot of places. But here it is in a nutshell. Week 1, the Washington Commanders will open up in Tampa, Florida to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Back at home, week 2 to face the New York Giants. Week 3 on the road in Cincinnati to face the Bengals on Monday Night Football, followed by a week 4 road trip to Arizona to face the Cardinals. Week 5 back home against the Cleveland Browns. Week 6 kind of back home, kind of not back home, on the road, quote unquote, to face the Baltimore Ravens. Week 7 at home against Carolina Panthers. Week 8 at home against the Chicago Bears. Week 9 on the road to face the Giants. Week 10 back at home to face the Pittsburgh Steelers. Week 11 on the road for Thursday Night Football against the Philadelphia Eagles. Week 12 at home against the Dallas Cowboys. Week 13 at home against the Tennessee Titans. Week 14 bye week. More to follow on that. Week 15 on the road against the New Orleans Saints. Week 16 at home against the Eagles. Week 17 at home against the Falcons. Week 18 wrapping up the season on the road in Jerry's World to face the Dallas Cowboys in what I predict will be Dak Prescott's final game starting for the Dallas Cowboys. Could be wrong. We'll see what happens by the end of the season. So let's start off with the first 4 here. Week 1, 2, 3, and 4. The Washington Commanders, again, starting off on the road to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, back home against the Giants, on the road to face the Bengals, and then on the road to face the Cardinals. So 3 of the first 4 games on the road. That's never how you want to start an NFL season. Obviously, there's a little bit behind that. But if there's a silver lining here, the road trip to Arizona, the longest road trip of the year that the Washington Commanders will face, the road trip to Tampa Bay, one of the longest road trips. I think it's like top 4 or 5 road trips of the year for the Washington Commanders. So they're in the first 4 weeks. You're getting 2 of your longest road trips out of the way right off the bat, and they're not back-to-back. So you've got a home game against the New York Giants. You've got a road game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Cincinnati, not too far away. It's about a 7-hour drive. I'm going to be making the drive. The Washington Commanders will fly. It's about an hour and a half flight or so. So not very far. It's Monday night. So from that Sunday matchup at home against the New York Giants to that Monday nighter against the Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to get a little bit of an extended break. So not really a pseudo bye, but certainly a little bit more time between those 2 matchups. Of course, what you don't like is the fact that you basically have 2 playoff teams here in the first 4 games, potentially 3. I mean, the Arizona Cardinals, a lot of people, we kind of sleep on the Arizona Cardinals because they did finish number 4 or with the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft. So obviously not a world beater, not a juggernaut of a team. But when Kyler Murray came back, the Arizona Cardinals actually did not look incredibly terrible. And you think about it, this is their 2nd year in the system. And even though Kyler wasn't getting a lot of the physical reps early in the season last year, still getting those mental reps. So you can still call it his 2nd season in this system. They've gotten him some weapons. I mean, I would not be surprised, especially in today's NFL, to see the Arizona Cardinals make a little bit of noise this season. So I don't necessarily count them as one of the worst teams in the NFL, kind of the way that you do traditionally. The Cincinnati Bengals, of course, with Joe Burrow back, are one of the most dangerous teams in the league. The New York Giants, I know a lot of us would like to shake our heads, poo-poo on them. So I think the loss of Saquon Barkley is significant, but we can't forget, guys, Daniel Jones has had the Washington Commanders number. I don't get it. I don't understand it just as much as you guys don't understand it. Certainly a good amount of games that the Washington Commanders should have won against the New York Giants over the years. But for whatever reason, whenever they play the Giants, it just seems to be bad football for Washington. And of course, Tampa Bay, winners in the NFC South last year. A lot of people joked, biggest loser, worst division of football. But they also ousted the Philadelphia Eagles and gave the Detroit Lions a pretty good run for their money before ultimately falling the division round to those Detroit Lions in Detroit in a very hostile environment. So don't sleep on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got Baker Mayfield back. Second season for him with that team. They do have a new system, but it's a system that Baker actually feels better in, with Liam Cohen coming in as the offensive coordinator to replace Dave Canales, who left Tampa to be the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Liam Cohen was the offensive coordinator in Los Angeles during Baker's short stint with the Rams. Basically, he was the biggest advocate for the Buccaneers bringing Coach Cohen into the organization. So not necessarily a drop-off necessarily going on there. And they've obviously returned a lot of their really good players this offseason. So not the toughest schedule, in my opinion, not the toughest stretch of the season, in my opinion, but certainly some hurdles here. 3 road games, a primetime game against a playoff caliber team, the Cincinnati Bengals, as long as Joe Burrow is healthy. So certainly a rough slate for the Washington Commanders to start that season. Start the season. Could see them start 1-3 here. You would love 2-2. I think if you get wins against the Giants and the Cardinals, you feel really good. If you lose against the Buccaneers and the Bengals, I mean, I think you kind of just chalk that up as like, yeah, okay, this team isn't quite there yet. 2-2 would be great. 3-1 would be amazing. I mean, 3-1, I think we're all kind of just through the roof and super happy with what's going on in Washington, right? The final 4 games, let's drop to the end of the season. Week 15, 16, 17, 18. You got a game at New Orleans. You got 2 home games against the Eagles and then against the Falcons. And then you finish off on the road against the Dallas Cowboys. And look, from a personal selfish standpoint, can't necessarily complain about getting to go to Texas in December, or I guess January, right? Go from the cold, frigid weather here in the DMV, most likely to a little bit warmer temperatures in Dallas. And then, of course, Jerry's World AT&T Stadium. It's a pretty nice stadium, so it's not necessarily a really bad way to finish off the year. But you look at 2 road games, 2 home games to finish off the year. You like that. You like that split. Obviously, you'd love a 3-1. You love a 4-0, but I think you'll take a 2-2. Road trip to New Orleans coming out of the bye. So week 14 is that bye week. So your road trip to New Orleans, again, New Orleans is like one of those top 4 longest road trips of the year for the Commanders this year. So you get that trip after you get your bye week. So you kind of like the way those 2 games stack up, and then back-to-back home games against the Philadelphia Eagles and Atlanta Falcons after that trip. So not really a bad way to end the season. Of course, the New Orleans Saints hope to contend in the NFC South, so they hope to be a playoff team. The Philadelphia Eagles figure to be in the playoff race. The Atlanta Falcons, a lot of people have them really hyped up to be like the top dog in the NFC South. I kind of think it's a little bit overblown, to be quite honest with you. And then, of course, the Dallas Cowboys are the Dallas Cowboys. I feel like this is probably the last year we're going to see Mike McCarthy coaching the Dallas Cowboys. Might be the last year we see Dak Prescott quarterbacking the Dallas Cowboys. Would not hate seeing the Washington Commanders send those 2 off with a loss at home in Jerry's World. Certainly would be a story to watch at the end of the season. So that's how we're going to start. That's how we're going to end it. Let's get into some details here. Let's talk about the toughest and easiest schedules, streaks, or runs. Let's talk about some likes and dislikes on the schedule as we continue on today's episode. Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks to our friends over at GameTime. GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting your playoff tickets even faster and easier if you happen to be in an area with NBA playoff games going on. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets. No playoff games in DC right now, but the WNBA's Washington Mystics are at home against Chicago Sky Thursday night. So if you're watching this episode the day it launches, you can still go see basketball tonight. Go see Angel Reese make her DC debut for the Chicago Sky. You can get tickets as low as $153, or you plan a Sunday baseball trip. Go to Nationals Park to see the Nats host the Miami Marlins for as little as $5 a ticket. GameTime has got Last minute deals that save you up to 60%. Flash deals that save you even more with exclusive in-app offers. So go to GameTime, take the guesswork out of buying tickets, download the GameTime app, create your account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create your account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. Download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listener, first view today and every day. Every day, make sure you come back tomorrow. We're going to do a mailbag tomorrow. Usually mailbag is Wednesday, but because of everything going on, OTA practice, schedule release, all that good stuff, we are going to do a mailbag on Friday to end the week. So if you've got a mailbag question, insiders, you know what to do, man. Just text me directly. Send me your questions. I'll be sending you all a text to solicit those questions anyway, so you don't even got to worry about it. YouTubers, drop your questions in the YouTube comments section. Let me know what you want to know about. We got a lot of stuff going on. Again, schedule release, rookie minicamp, OTAs, practices coming up, all kinds of craziness going on. So let me know anything you want to talk about. Nothing is off limits. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your television all day? Finding out that you got to turn it down when all the shouting begins. We'll make the switch over to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's start off breaking down this Washington Commanders schedule by looking at the two primetime games that Washington will play. First one comes week 3 at Cincinnati to face the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday Night Football. The second one, week 11 in Philadelphia to face the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday Night Football. So we have a situation here where the Washington Commanders have no home primetime games. So the Washington local crowd, the DMV crowd, the whatever FedEx Field, Commanders Field is going to be renamed eventually crowd, not going to be able to witness any primetime games. And I know primetime games are a big draw for home crowds, big draw for fan bases. Personally, I'm going to let you guys in behind the curtain a little bit. Media members, at least most of us, not necessarily all of us, I want to speak for everybody, but most media members, we hate primetime games because we don't get off work till like 3 a.m. And as much as you might say, well, just sleep in. It's easy. Yeah, it's not so easy to sleep in just for one weekend every once in a while. So, champagne problems, right? First world problems over here in the media world. Feel bad for us, guys. So week 3 at Cincinnati, Monday Night Football. That being said, the environment is always electric, and the Cincinnati Bengals crowd is going to be electric. Jaden Daniels coming in to face Joe Burrow for the first time, hoping, fingers crossed, knock on wood, that Joe Burrow is healthy for that game. Ohio State Buckeye legend Joe Burrow healthy for that game. I think you come into it pretty much expecting the Washington Commanders to take a loss here, right? With Joe Burrow going up against or playing for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are Super Bowl contenders, not just playoff contenders. Without him, it's a little bit of a different story. I don't know who their backup is right off the top of my head right now, but if Joe Burrow's not going in that game for whatever reason, again, knock on wood that he's healthy, but if he's not for whatever reason, then I think the Commanders' odds and chances obviously go way up. Still cool to see that game in that environment, and personally, it actually works out really well for me. Just to give you a way too early warning that you're not going to remember, I'm still going to tell you about when the time comes. I will actually be in Ohio for pretty much all of that week. So the problem with that is I'm going to miss a good amount of the practices leading up to that game, but my in-laws are going to be celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary that week. They live in Ohio, so we're going to be going to Ohio to help celebrate with them, and then we're just going to stay there, and I'm just going to drive from their house to Cincy for the game, and then we'll drive home probably Tuesday or Wednesday after following the game. So it kind of works out personally for my schedule as well, but again, just very exciting. Anytime you get to see your favorite team on primetime, and that matchup early on, Jaden Daniels, potentially a future face of the NFL. Certainly hope to be that he's a future face of the franchise here in Washington, going up against Joe Burrow, another one of the young guns here in the league. And then you have week 11 in Philly, Thursday Night Football. The good news here, Washington's got a home game against Pittsburgh the week before that. So Sunday, they'll host the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then they have to make the trip. It's like a 3-hour drive up the road to face the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday night. So as Thursday night games go, as short weeks go, that's probably the best you're going to get is a home game, and then you're driving to your closest opponent outside the Baltimore Ravens. Like that would be the only other situation is like the Baltimore Ravens was Thursday Night Football. Then I guess that would technically be better, but I guess second best option here this year on the schedule. So you don't necessarily hate that. Still hate Thursday Night Football, not just because it's prime time. I just hate Thursday Night Football. I think it's bad for player safety. I think the game quality suffers. So personally, I just hate it. In week 11, you got a very young team rookie quarterback, first-year head coach. They're going to play 10 straight games before they walk into this game. We saw how that can impact the team last year. So who knows what we'll be looking at by that time. Fingers crossed. I'm a big hype season guy, so hopefully, you know what I mean? Commanders are 10-0 going into that game, and everything's copacetic. Third straight Week 14 bye week for the Washington Commanders. We got to talk about this. I mean, we talked about it in our schedule kind of preview and prediction episode, right? To me personally, I was like, there's no way the NFL could do this to an NFL team this many times in a row. Week 14 bye is absolutely brutal, especially when you have a young quarterback. We saw what happened with Sam Howell last year. I'm not saying it's all because of the Week 14 bye, nothing like that, but certainly having to play 13 straight games before getting any kind of break. By the time the Commanders even got to the break last year, there was no sense of relief. It was like, man, you mean we got to come back from this thing? Like we get a week off and we got to come back and do this some more. It was almost more of a punishment than anything else. Week 14 bye weeks are absolutely brutal. I don't wish them on any NFL team. I wish the NFL could figure out some sort of way to condense all the bye weeks from like week 6 to like week 10. You know what I mean? I don't think they can do that from a scheduling standpoint, but perfect world type of situation. The only thing worse than a week 14 bye is a week 4 bye, week 5 bye. You know what I mean? That's way too early, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, they're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to deal with it. But obviously it's something that, nobody enjoys. I had some insiders texting me about it, kind of asking, why the NFL continues to do this when they're going to get criticized by the Commanders fan base, all this other stuff. Bottom line, guys, honestly, the NFL does not care about criticism, about stuff like that, to be just completely honest. Moving on to the toughest and least toughest stretch in the NFL schedule for the Commanders this week. I've actually got 2 candidates for the toughest schedule stretches, and I'm looking at week 3 to week 6. You've got 3 road games in that 4-game stretch. Week 3 at Cincinnati, week 4 at Arizona, week 5 at home versus Cleveland, week 6 on the road against Baltimore. You've got 3 playoff caliber teams in there: Cincinnati, Cleveland, Baltimore. Then you've got your longest road trip of the year in Arizona in that stretch as well. So for me, that kind of stands out as possibly the toughest stretch for the Washington Commanders. But my second candidate for that toughest stretch, week 15, 16, 17, 18 to end the season at New Orleans. Again, you're like third longest road trip. And then you've got the Eagles at home, the Falcons, who are expected to be the NFC South's top team. If they're living up to expectations, then, you know what I mean, that's a pretty tough game. And then, of course, finishing the season in Dallas is always going to be a tough situation. Easiest stretch, or maybe least difficult stretch for the Washington Commanders. I think it's hard to call it an easiest stretch when you're coming off a 4-win season. You got about a 50% new team, a rookie quarterback. I don't know if calling it the easiest stretch is the best way to go about it, but maybe least difficult stretch. I'm looking at week 7 through 10. You got week 7 at home against Carolina Panthers, week 8 at home against Chicago Bears, week 9 on the road against the Giants, week 10 at home against Pittsburgh. Carolina Panthers have been a mess. I think they're still going to be a mess. I think, to me, that's a game you circle as a potential win. Week 8 against Chicago Bears. I do like what the Chicago Bears have actually done to put weapons around Caleb Williams. Kind of wish they had done that for Justin Fields. Maybe things would have worked out a little bit better, and they could have used that number 1 overall pick on, I don't know, a tackle or a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. But anyway, Chicago Bears, Caleb Williams, again, it's a rookie quarterback. It's a coaching staff that's definitely on the hot seat if they don't make this thing work. So there's always an opportunity there. Week 9 against the New York Giants. Again, everybody kind of wants to look down on the Giants. I look down on the Giants, especially getting rid of, or not being able to retain Saquon Barkley, but hard to deny what Daniel Jones has been able to do against the Commanders. So you got to take a grain of salt there. And then week 10 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who knows what they're going to look like with either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields quarterbacking that team. So again, not saying that those are all gimmies. I could see them coming out of that stretch 2-2 as well. But if I have to pick a stretch that's kind of the easiest or the least difficult, I think those 4 games are probably where it's at. And it's right in the middle of the schedule, which is actually kind of advantageous as well. Got some final likes and dislikes features on the Washington Commanders schedule this year. Coming up next on this episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing this episode of Locked On Commanders thanks to our buddies over at FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. So go find that line that you think just can't miss. Go find that money line that you just think can't miss, no matter who it is. You think the Oklahoma City Thunder can't lose against the Dallas Mavericks next time they play? Go put $5 on them. You think the Dallas Mavericks can't lose against the Thunder? Go put $5 on them. Minnesota Timberwolves against the Denver Nuggets. You had all kinds of options In the NHL, the Florida Panthers still one of the top teams as they look to secure the Stanley Cup this year. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Find whatever you want to bet on. Make every playoff shot count. Bet that $5, win. Get that $150 in bonus bets. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up this schedule breakdown episode of Locked On Commanders. Thanks again for making Locked On Commanders your first listen, your first view today or every day. Again, we got a mailbag episode coming up tomorrow, every dayers. Make sure you send your questions and drop them in the YouTube comment sections. Insiders, text me directly, send me your questions. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders if you want to sign up to be an insider and text me today. So I want to wrap up this episode with some likes and dislikes. And I want to kind of talk about the sexiest games on this schedule, right? The games that even if Washington isn't all that great this year, even if they don't necessarily make a playoff push this year in the first year under Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, what are the games that are just kind of the sexiest on the roster or on the schedule you're going to want to watch anyway? I think week 1 at Tampa Bay is a pretty sexy matchup. Now, personally, as I kind of have discussed over time with you guys here, I started off my NFL coverage journey, whatever you want to call it, covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were really good to me during my time in the Army. I mean, there's not a lot of NFL teams that will let a guy who doesn't even live in the state of Florida credential for anything and everything available just whenever he's available. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of those teams. So I will forever feel indebted to them for letting me have the access they did while I was living in Maryland and New York and all that stuff. It was kind of crazy, but really cool. But also it's a playoff team. You know what I mean? So it's a good barometer. It's always a good way to kind of measure yourself and see where your talent is. You know what I mean? If this team can come out there and fight and be aggressive and hang with that team, then you know you've got a talented roster on board. And I think that's a really good way to do things. Plus, Raymond James Stadium, if you're a Commanders fan, you've never been to Ray J, it's one of the best stadiums in the NFL. Highly recommend making the trip down there if you live in Florida. I know there's some of you who live in Florida. Make the trip out there. And by all means, if you're there, make sure you let me know so we can catch up and I can thank you in person for supporting the show. Week 3 at Cincinnati, Joe Burrow, one of the young guns in the NFL, going up against Jaden Daniels this Monday night. Obviously, that's sexy. Week 4 at Arizona, Cliff Kingsbury returning back to Arizona, trying to beat Kyler Murray, his former protege. So that's exciting. Week 6 against the Baltimore Ravens. DMV matchup is always a lot of fun. Usually it's preseason. This year it's regular season. Week 8 against Chicago, 1v2. Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels. Jaden's opportunity to prove that he's actually the better of the two. Week 11 at Philly. Again, it's an Eagles game. You guys know how those rivalries go. It's a Thursday night game, so you like that as well. So those, to me, are the kind of the sexiest games on the schedule. Some things that I like about the schedule here for the Washington Commanders, opening on the road. I talked about it in our previous episode, previewing the schedule release. I actually really like this because you've got 17 games. This year, the NFC gets that extra home game. So opening on the road means that you've got 9 home games, 7 road games the rest of the way. So I really like that. And the fact that this road game is one of the longer trips. Again, you get that out of the way right off the bat. I really like that part of the schedule. 5 of 7 at home from week 7 to week 13 going into the bye week. So really 6 of 7 weeks or 6 of 8 weeks, the Washington Commanders will not have to travel at all from week 17 to week 14. That to me is really cool. So, I mean, if you have the late buy in there, at least the NFL kind of counters it by giving the Commanders 5 of 7 home games from week 7 to week 13. And if I remember correctly, I think that one of those road games is actually even Baltimore. Week 6 is Baltimore. So really, if you want to kind of look at it, week 6 to week 14, the Washington Commanders only travel out of their organic geographic location a couple of times. So again, a really cool kind of feature of the schedule, I think, for a travel perspective. 2 of the Final 4 at home. You know what I mean? Like I said in the beginning when we talked about the Final 4, you like having at least 2 of those at home if you can't get 3. What do I dislike? Obviously, I hate the late buy. I don't like the fact that the NFL waited till week 8 to do Caleb Williams against Jaden Daniels because, let's be honest, teams with rookie quarterbacks, right? Like, that could be not a very attractive matchup by the time we actually get there, depending on where either of these teams are. If both teams are looking really good, really competitive, even if their win-losses aren't great, but they're really competitive teams, then maybe it's still kind of sexy or whatever. But I think week 8, Caleb versus Jaden, I think that's the reason it's not primetime. I think if you do it in the first 3 or 4 weeks, you can make that a primetime game and potentially kind of rehash all those conversations. 3 of the first 4 on the road. Again, you don't like to open up the road or the schedule that way, but you can't get that middle of the season stretch that we just talked about that we like without getting some of those things that we don't like. A road Monday Night Football game before the Arizona trip. So you're on the road Monday Night Football against Cincinnati. Then you got a short week next Sunday. You've got to be in Arizona to face the Cardinals. that's going to be a tough transition. And then, of course, closing the season on the road. I also don't like the fact that, what is this, like the 10th year that the Commanders are going to finish off the season playing against the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, I know it's got to be a divisional game, but there's two other teams. There's the Eagles and Giants. Like, let's get a different team. I know it's the biggest rivalry. Maybe it's because I'm not a 20-year, Washington fan and stuff like that. Maybe for those of you who have been diehard Washington fans your entire lives, let me know. Like, is the Dallas Washington rivalry so good that it's okay to end it every single year with that game, or am I right here? Am I right, or am I just telling people get off my grass? I don't know. Maybe I'm making too big of it. But closing on the road, never something an NFL team wants to do. I'm a little bit annoyed that it's again the Dallas Cowboys. Although, like I said, finishing off in Jerry's world, there's worse stadiums to finish off your season. Coming up tomorrow, guys, we got a mailbag episode. Drop your questions in the YouTube comment section. Text me directly if you're a Locked On Commanders insider. If you're not and you want to join the ever-growing group of insiders, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to do that today. Don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 live streaming sports channel on YouTube. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Thanks for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.